Right. Well, hello. Welcome to the webinar about leadership styles. My name is Molly, and for those who don't know me, I am a coach for women who work in the nonprofit sector. I also work full-time in the nonprofit sector. I also teach about the nonprofit sector. I also am a board member of the nonprofit sector. So it's quite possible to say that my life evolves around the nonprofit sector because I love it so much. So thank you for being here. I hope that you are involved in the nonprofit sector and that this will be great information for you as you're doing your work there. I'm also going to be a published author in the fall. And so if you want to know more about when that book comes out, what it's all about, you can always check that out at Facebook and just search Hopelessly Hopeful Books, plural, and you'll find it there. But for tonight, I'm really glad that you decided to take the time to join me and really to become a better leader. I am a nut for leadership profiles, Myers-Briggs, INTJ, DISC, CD, Enneagram, 8-Wing 7. These things, I just love them. And so tonight we're going to get to do another one that I'm a very big fan of. And I just really appreciate these because when I do something like this, then I learn a lot about myself and how to communicate better with others who may not think exactly like me. So I'm hoping that you'll have the same experience and that by the end of this webinar, you'll be able to communicate better and produce better results quicker. So if you're ready to start, let's get started. So think about this. A good leader should always, how would you answer that? If you want to think about it a little bit, feel free. There's no right or wrong answer, of course. And you're always welcome to put that in the chat below or to make your comment. And let's see what everybody thinks. Don't worry, not graded. Even though I may be a professor, not graded. Now, before we start thinking through what that answer may be, a good leader always, I do want to talk to you a little bit about James McGregor Burns. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning leadership expert. He's a historian. He's a presidential biographer. He's a political scientist, and he has got a wonderful theory about leadership. Now, according to his principles of transformational leadership, which is basically being an inspiring leader, an effective leader is someone who does the following. A good leader creates an inspiring vision of the future, motivates and inspires people to engage with that vision, manages the delivery of the vision, coaches and builds a team so that it's more effective at achieving that vision. Now, anyone who strives to be a leader should always be changing, improving based on what they learn and what their followers need from them. The longer you act as a leader, the more likely it is that you'll change the way you choose to complete the sentence, a good leader should always. Now, in order to know you and yourself as a leader, you probably should know where you stand as a leader. So let's just break down the way that you may have answered that question from above. We're going to dive into a survey developed by the leadership expert and professor Bill Torgert and psychologist Suzanne Cook-Gertner. It's called the Leadership Development Profile, which you should probably get excited. I know I was when I first took this test. And what it does is it helps you understand your leadership style based on the action and logic that you most agree with. So grab your paper and pen. When you read a statement on one of the following slides, you'll write down that letter and number combination. So for instance, S1, A3. Trust me, it will make sense in just a minute. Now, there's no right or wrong answers. And if you find yourself wholeheartedly agreeing without hesitation, this is me, I know it for sure, put a star, put some kind of indication next to that. Now, at the end of these next groups of slides, we'll determine what your answers say about you as a leader. Now, keep in mind that the categories and the statements are organized in a way that may not necessarily be related to the final outcome. So you'll see some different types, but that may not be your final type. All right, here we go. An individualist leader is self-aware, creative, primarily focused on their own actions as opposed to the overall organizational performance. They're exceptionally driven by the desires to exceed personal goals and constantly improving upon themselves. So, here are some statements that an individualist leader might agree with. I1. A good leader should always trust their own intuition over the established organizational processes. I2. It's important to be able to relate to others so I can easily communicate complex ideas to them. I3. I'm more comfortable with progress than sustained success. If you agree with any of those, write down the letter and number. I1, I2, I3. Strategist. Strategists are extremely aware of the environment in which they operate. They make it a point to gather understanding of the structures and processes that make their businesses and nonprofits tick, but they're also to keep perspective, apply critical thinking, and evaluate what could be improved. Now, here's some things that a strategist might say. S1, a good leader should always be able to build consensus in divided groups. S2, it's important to help develop an organization as a whole, in addition to the growth of the individual. S3, conflict is inevitable, but I know enough about my team's personal and professional relationships to handle the friction. Now, if you agree with any of those statements, write down the letter and number, S1, S2, or S3. The alchemist. What distinguishes alchemists from other action logics is their unique ability to see the big picture in everything while understanding they need to take the details seriously. Under this style of leadership, no department or employee is ever overlooked. So here's some statements that an alchemist leader might agree with. A1, a good leader helps their employees reach their highest potential and possess the necessary empathy and moral awareness to get there. A2, it's important to make a profound and positive impact on whatever I'm working on. A3, I have a unique ability to balance short-term needs and long-term goals. If you agree with any of these statements, write down the letter and number, A1, A2, A3. Opportunists are guided by a certain innate level of mistrust. In others, they relied on a facade of control to keep their employees in line. These types of people are usually the ones that believe in the adage of an eye for an eye. Here's what some things an opportunist might say. O1, a good leader should always view others as potential competition to be bested, even if at the expense of their professional development. O2, I reserve the right to reject the input of those who question or criticize my ideas. Now, if you agree with either of these statements, write down the letter and number, O1, O2. The diplomat is not concerned with assuming control. Instead, they seek to cause minimal impact by conforming to existing norms and completing their daily tasks with as little friction as possible. So here's some things a diplomat might say. D1, a good leader should always resist change since it risks causing instability. D2, it's important to provide the social glue, so to say, in terms of situation, safety, and away from conflict. D3, I tend to thrive in more team-oriented or supporting leadership roles. Now, if you agree with any of these statements, D1, D2, D3, go ahead and write down that letter and number. The expert. The expert is always at the front line of their field and continuously striving to perfect their knowledge and meet their own high expectations. The expert is fantastic as a contributor and a source of knowledge, but can usually stand to improve in the field of emotional intelligence. So here's some statements that an expert might agree with. E1, a good leader should prioritize their own pursuit of knowledge over the needs of the organization and their direct reports. E2, when problem solving with others in the company, my opinion tends to be the correct one. If you agree with either of these statements, write down the letter or number, E1, E2. All right, here's the fun part. We are about to find out what kind of leader you are. So what you're going to want to do is take a look at your notes and then look at the table that you see on your screen. The different styles are separated out with different letters and different number combinations, and you could be a variant of more than one. So for example, I will show you what mine looks like, hopefully. So for me, there were quite a few strategists and quite a few transformational. And so I ended up being, let's see, 60% transformational and 40% strategic. The more statements that you agree with, the more likely you have to practice that mix of leadership styles. So for another example, if you agree to everything that the strategist said, which would have been S1, S2, or S3, this could make you 66% strategic leader and maybe 33% democratic leader, because S1 and S2 and S3 appear in those different categories. Now, if you agreed with just S3, but maybe everything that the alchemist said, then this would make you 50% transformational, 25% strategic, and 25% democratic leader. So you're really looking for those letters and number combinations that you circled and how many fall in line with what you see on your screen. Now, if you'd like to share your results, feel free. There's always the comment box below. Okay, so now we're going to take a little bit more time to walk through each one of those styles in more detail. I think the combinations are really exciting and very interesting when you start to think about how you live your daily life and how these styles are actually at play. Now, for those of you who fell in the category of a democratic leadership, you will be happy to hear that this style is commonly very effective. These type of leaders make decisions based on the input of team members. And although the leader makes the final call, each employee has equal say on the project's direction. Democratic leadership is the one most effective style because it allows lower level employees to exercise authority, which gives them, well, more skin in the game. And it makes them more loyal to the company as a whole. Solving an issue under a democratic leadership resembles how decisions can be made on, say, a nonprofit board meeting. A leader giving the team a few decision-related options, open discussion about each, and then either the leader makes the decision based on that input or the decision is put to a vote. In either case, that is a style of democratic leadership. Now, the opposite of the democratic leadership is autocratic leadership. It's rarely effective long-term. In this leadership style, employees are neither considered nor consulted prior to a direction and are expected to adhere to the decision at a time and place stipulated by the leader. An example of an autocratic leadership might be when a manager changes the hours of a work shift for multiple employees without consulting everyone. Now, in today's workplace culture, this type of leadership can't be sustained without losing employees. If you fell under this leadership category, it's okay. Work on being more open to the intellect and perspective of the rest of your team. Trust me, you don't have to do your work alone anymore. Okay, who learned French in high school? If you recall, the French term laissez-faire literally means to let them do. And it can refer to leaders who hand over nearly all of the authority to their employees. In young startups, you might see a laissez-faire company founder who makes no major office policies around the worker hours or deadlines and puts full trust in the employees while really their focus is building that company or nonprofit up. While this leadership style can be empowering for employees, can also limit the development and really overlook some of those critical pieces that you'll need in place as the nonprofit or the company grows. Strategic leadership sits at the intersection between the main operations and the growth opportunities in a nonprofit. This type of leader promotes a culture of inquiry, but also accepts additional burdens in the interest of ensuring consistency and stability for everyone else. Strategic leaders are constantly vigilant, honing their abilities to anticipate by scanning the environment for signals of change. They also have a tendency to want to study failures, their own and their own teams. It's just a way to look and mine for those hidden lessons. Transformational leadership. Transformational leaders are always working to improve on the status quo and pushing their team to grow and reach outside of their comfort zone. This type of leadership style is greatly desired amongst growth-minded nonprofits because it motivates employees to see what they're capable of. One potential downfall is that a transformational leader can risk of losing sight of everybody's individual learning curve, especially if the correct type of coaching and direction isn't provided. They just jump out in front of everybody else. They see the vision, it's already in place for them, but they haven't allowed the rest of the organization to catch up quite yet. And perhaps the most common type of leader, a transactional leader can actually become a manager who reward their employees for precisely the work they're expected to do. These type of leaders lean on things like scheduled bonuses, staying within the status quo. Transactional leaders help establish roles and responsibilities for each employee, but they can also encourage employees to stick to just doing the bare minimum. Now, other phases that help describe this type of leadership include traditional, old school. Bureaucratic leaders go by the books. They may listen and consider the input of other employees, but they just tend to reject the idea if it conflicts with the nonprofit policy or past practices. Employees under this leadership style may not feel as controlled as they would under autocratic leadership, but there's still a lack of freedom in how much people will be able to do in their role. This type of leadership can lead to maybe discouragement, maybe a lack of innovation, something ambitious and growth-oriented nonprofits probably want to avoid. Now, regardless of what leadership style you fall into, or the combination thereof, we know that there are aspects that you should always try to improve. And perhaps the most important one is communication. As a leader, you need to be able to clearly, succinctly explain goals, tasks, and, well, everything in between. This means mastering all forms of communication, the one-on-one, the departmental, the staff-wide, phone, email, social media, on and on and on. The large part of communicating well involves creating an open and steady flow of communication from your team and creating an environment of trustworthiness, positive feedback, and that allows your employees to come to you when they have a good idea. Now, a few things that everyone can benefit for working on a communication includes reading body language of those you're talking to, reducing ambiguity both in written and in spoken language, learning more about active listening, connecting the heart, connecting on that common ground. There's many things that you can do just by communicating a little bit better that will make the entire team better and thus making the entire nonprofit organization better. Now, as a leader, it's your job to inspire your workers to go the extra mile and build their self-esteem along the way. Why? Why would that even be important? Well, it helps them stay loyal to the work and it increases their investment and, quite frankly, at the end of the day, increases the success of the organization. So in order to keep your team motivated, show them that you're committed by asking for feedback, being open to listening to their concerns, recognizing them in front of the rest of the team, understanding differences in, well, work styles and personalities, and saying thank you for the work you do. Some things that I just listed are easy, some things not as much, but I know that all leaders do this well and you can too. One other thing that you might want to consider is delegation. It's common amongst novice leaders to believe that delegating tasks is, quite frankly, just a sign of weakness. It's not. It's not. It's one of the hardest things to do. But by identifying the skills of your employees and assigning duties to them based on those skills, you're being smart, strategic, resourceful. So use those communication skills to define expectations and explore what each employee might be willing to take on. Get creative. You can think about how you want to assign those responsibilities and how you want to ask about that feedback. Just because you've been used to doing something one way doesn't mean that someone may have a fresh take on it and do it a different way, or maybe a third different way, or maybe a fourth different way. Just be flexible. Now, this trust that you give others to handle large parts of the nonprofit will provide them with a boost of self-esteem, make them feel more involved. Just be sure that you're encouraging open communication along the way. Otherwise, people start to feel overwhelmed, ill-equipped, and that doesn't get anybody any far. Now, if you want to learn more about how to delegate, I'll be covering that topic on July 1st of 2021, so we can talk more about that then. Now, there are a few more resources that you can look at that helped to create this webinar. So here's the first one, and I can always send you a link if you want to go directly to some of these. Pardon the color coding. I don't know what happened when I kept trying to create this slide. But in the end, I do want to give you my gratitude and appreciation and say thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to join me. I love getting to talk about these things, and I hope that you learned something valuable. And I want you to know that I am proud of you for taking the steps toward becoming a better leader. It's hard, but it's totally doable. Now, if you have further questions about what we discussed, you can put them in the comments below. I'm going to stop the recording soon so that those who are here live can chit chat for a bit. But before I do that, just wanted to let you know that you can learn more about yourself and your leadership styles and how that plays out in your life by attending other webinars. These are held on the first Thursday of every month, so feel free to go to nonprofitsonamission.com, click on upcoming events, and you'll be able to see and register the ones that may interest you. And I'll put that in the chat after I hit the stop button on my recording. The other thing you might be interested in is that I'm certified in DISC, which is a behavioral work style test that will be helpful to you and to those around you to be more productive and have more fun. If you're interested in taking about a 20-minute test and then an hour follow-up to learn your DISC style or to bring DISC to your nonprofit, then you can email me on that email that you see on the screen, mollie@nonprofitsonamission.com. Nonprofits is plural. You can also find me on the website, nonprofitsonamission.com. So this is the final slide of the presentation, and I think that quote is a perfect way to end this webinar. A boss has the title, a leader has the people. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.